my microphone on? It's a little low. Can everybody hear me? There we go. Okay, hello. Welcome to the first event in this year's Seavey Reading series. As is my custom, I will set the mood with a few lines from a poem, this time from Brenda Hillman, who was a Seavey series visiting writer back in September of 2018. Soon after this book, Extra Hidden Life Among the Days, was published. This is from a poem called Day 9. The cops seem younger than our undergraduates. Their very arbitrary boundaries make no sense. Some must cross over to continue being human. Across the invisible, we hear the great dead purring at the back of history's throat as people report being called to heaven. Brenda Hillman. Okay, my name is Catherine Dent. I am the director of the Writers Institute at Susquehanna University, and before I introduce the student who will introduce tonight's featured guest, I get to say the thank yous. I'll start by acknowledging each of you here for the role you play in fostering the Writers Institute community. Whether you're a writer, a reader, a student, a teacher, a lover of the arts, or a friend, thank you for being here tonight. My gratitude extends to the generations of people who lived on this land long before it became a university, and to our university ancestors, scholars, academic leaders, and students who dedicated their lives to making this place hospitable and accessible. I embrace the values for which we stand: curiosity, free inquiry, cross-cultural competence, courage, humble self-awareness, kindness, justice, and wellness. Thank you to President Jonathan Green and Lynn Buck for your ongoing enthusiasm and leadership. And to Pat Long, our Dean of the School of the Arts and the School of Humanities. Sue Yenchko, would you please stand so that we can express our gratitude for your longtime support of the Writers Institute Visiting Writers Series? Thank you. And we are indebted to our many other donors, and especially Rick and Sue Seavey, whose generous gifts help make this series possible. Thanks to Caitlin Wears-Bicky, this semester's series assistant, and our multiple literary arts interns who are here to support us tonight. They'll be selling books for our author to sign after the reading back in the box office. So after the reading ends, I encourage all of you to stand in line, 200 people long, to meet the author and buy books from our students. And also I thank Paige Katila and Eden Savoy, the students responsible for filming and putting this on YouTube. Thanks to John Foltz in Communications, Tara Mackey in the Bookstore, the Department of IT and Events Management, and Marcom. And finally, I most earnestly thank the co-chairs of the Department of English and Creative Writing, Betsy Verhoeven and Silas Zobel, and all my colleagues in our department who have shown up today and every day. And now I get to introduce you to Jasmine Moody. Jasmine is a junior creative writing and theater performance double major from Long Island, New York. She's my fabulous advisee and a 3-year member and currently acting president for the National Congress of Black Women. Jasmine has been cast in the spring's student-directed production of Lovesick, an anthology of short plays. She played Puck in the Shakespeare Club's production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, and she was part of Blood Relations last year, as well as in the costume crew for An Evening of David Ives, a member of the ensemble for Jesus Christ Superstar. As a creative writing major, she's most engaged with poetry, but likes to write fiction in her free time. I'm very pleased to turn the microphone over to Jasmine Moody.
Good evening. I am so honored to be introducing Dr. Laurence Roth and his book, Unpacking My Father's Bookstore. Dr. Roth is the director and founder of the Jewish and Israel Studies program, the coordinator of the publishing and editing program here at Susquehanna, as well as a leader of the Build Collaborative Fellowship. He earned his PhD and master's at the University of California, Los Angeles, and he completed his undergraduate studies at the University of California, Berkeley. Dr. Roth has been awarded the John C. Horn Distinguished Service Leadership Award from Susquehanna University, fellowship into the John and Samuel Frankel Center for Judaic Studies at the University of Michigan for Unpacking My Father's Bookstore, and more. Unpacking My Father's Bookstore is not just the story of a building, but of carving out a unique Jewish identity from 1966 to 1994 in Los Angeles. While Dr. Roth navigates what it was like for him growing up in his father's bookstore, he also details how Jewish bookstores complement and reflect the development of Jewish culture in America. Whether it was giving into the stereotype of the Jewish bazaar by selling memorabilia and important religious items in bookshops, or leaning into the identity of the Jewish scholar by focusing on books and academics, the culture remained dynamic and thriving as stores opened and closed. To me, Dr. Roth is the type of professor you think of when you hear the word academic. He has always been the type of professor who encouraged you to learn through interpretation and discussion rather than just lectures. Taking his aesthetics and interpretation class helped me become a better reader, and therefore writer, by fostering my ability to process what I was reading. It also helped me to take information and make informed arguments based on the text I was reading. And truly, that is an invaluable skill. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Laurence Roth.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really touched. Thank you, Jasmine, for such a lovely introduction. Really, I'm touched and honored. I thank all the same people that Catherine thanked, but I also want to especially thank Catherine Dent for being so gracious in inviting me, giving me the honor to do this reading as part of the Seavey Reading series, and to Tony Zitta, too, who did so much work to make this happen. I also want to thank my colleagues who share my love of books and literature, my friends who have come out this evening to join me. Also, I'm very, very pleased and touched that you're here. And of course, not last but certainly not least, Mary Bannon, light of my life, and my son, Jonah Roth. Without your love and support, I could not possibly do any of this. And so I want to begin by showing you first, there's my dad, standing in front of his store, the store that I thought was the best incarnation of what he had in mind. And I want to begin by reading the first mini chapter from the book, entitled Sotheby's Manhattan, 1985, which will give you an idea of how I approached writing this book and the challenges that I felt that I faced. Dad, the guy you bought the Copenhagen Haggadah from, did he come back Monday or Friday? He came in Friday. We waited for him all day Monday. Really? I remember he came on Monday, and then we waited Friday for him to come back. We were totally sweating whether he'd be back before we closed at 4 for Shabbos. No, we waited Monday, right? Yes. How does this story go? Whom should I trust? My fallible memory or my father's now failing one? I think he came in on Monday, Dad. It was fall of '82, before Ben came home the next year, and I was still at the store full time. Was it '82? Jack looks down at his hands folded neatly in his lap as he leans back on the red sofa in my den in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. His still trim 88-year-old frame rests easily on the cushions, and he's dressed in his usual outfit: dark brown tailored slacks, a brown and tan checked sports shirt from Brooks Brothers, tan silk socks, and russet brown tassel loafers. We're at work again this afternoon, trying to clear up details from his past about the Jewish bookstore he owned and operated in Los Angeles for 28 years. And I'm tired, though not from our conversation. Almost 20 inches of snow is piled up on the front lawn, but the walkway and sidewalk in front of the house are clear after I'd spent all morning in the cold struggling to dig them out with my cheap shovel. Jack had watched me work from behind the glass storm door at our entryway, his arms behind his back and neatly combed white hair crowning his head. He occasionally flashed me a thumbs up to signal what a fine job I was doing. Judging again, I said to myself, but I couldn't tell whether he approved of my progress or I had shoveled the snow in what he deemed was the correct way. Let's say it was '82 for now, I continue. He came in on Monday and walked up to the front counter where I was sitting, and I thought he was just another person, not Jewish, from the bus stop out front who confused the Pico store for a regular bookshop. But then he said he had a book he wanted to sell. It was wrapped in something, paper or maybe cloth, and when he unwrapped it, I knew I had to get you. You came out and I saw immediately from how you talked that he had something really valuable. I had to be careful, Jack cuts in, but I didn't want him to get away. He got it from his mother. They were Gentiles, and she worked for a rich Jewish family in Hungary. She was their maid, I think. They gave it to her, he said, as a token of appreciation for her work when they had to let her go, when the Nazis came in. Maybe it was really for safekeeping, and she just told him that, or she stole it, whatever. They all died, and then she came to the U.S. after the war. I offered him $1,200, but I didn't want to seem too eager, so I told him he could take his time and think about it. Yeah, and you started freaking out after he left because you didn't think he'd be back or that he'd go over to Fairfax. What are you talking about, freaking out? I didn't freak out. Jack's look of disgust at my description warns me to tidy my memory just as I did my walkway, making it neat and spotless in the way he likes. Otherwise, we'll just start arguing and I'll get nothing out of him. You were concerned, I meant to say, right? Sure, I was concerned. He could have gone somewhere else, but he came back and I gave him the $1,500. It was $1,500? Right, and he came in just as I was ready to close, and I gave him a check. The Haggadah was done in 1779, just beautiful. It was illuminated, and I kept it in a safe deposit box at the bank. I'd go and look at it, but it wasn't good to keep it there. So I sold it at Sotheby's. You made a good profit on it. Well, I bought it for $1,200, and it went for $150,000 at auction, so I guess I did okay. Jack says he needs to lie down for a while, and as he climbs the stairs, I put in my notes that $1,200 is probably the right amount, since he repeated it twice. But this is the game I play with him and with myself. I'm improvising because I've never done this before, and instead of recording him, I find it easier to write everything down, which is, I'm sure, exactly what I shouldn't be doing. It's just that I hate putting a recorder or a microphone between us. I prefer to jot down what he's saying when he says it. Yes, I'm a professor and I know how this should work, but I'm also the only son asking him to tell his stories, so I'm doing this my way. I get to decide. Bullshit, says Alana, Jack's second wife, when I later tell her about his version of the Sotheby's story. It seems that $1,500 really is what Jack paid for the Haggadah, because she was there and has the tax returns to prove it. And no, he didn't write a check either, because she told him not to use the store's checking account for the purchase, so that the Haggadah wouldn't be part of the store's inventory. He paid the guy in cash. I quickly run through the rest of Jack's story with her, that he called Sotheby's to begin arrangements, and they put him in touch with one of their affiliated appraisers in LA, who said the Haggadah was worth only $15,000, obviously too low. So then he called George Snyder, Sotheby's Judaica specialist at the time, who recognized its real value. Alana laughs. $15,000 was the amount a customer in Hancock Park offered Jack for the Haggadah, and he was considering taking it. She and her business colleague had to sit him down and explain what a bad idea that was. It was they who convinced him to take it to Sotheby's for auction. They even had to talk him into setting a reserve on the sale, the confidential minimum price below which a lot won't be sold. It was $150,000, precisely the amount it sold for, she says. Jack had previously sent me the Sotheby's catalog for the sale, so I'd already seen the sale results and a sale confirmation notice. They were both tucked into the page where Lot 19 is listed in Important Judaica, Books, Manuscripts, and Works of Art, New York, Monday, November 25, 1985. Haggadah, Seder Haggadah Shel Pesach, in Hebrew, instructions, and various passages in Judeo-German, written in the letters of Amsterdam, in Copenhagen, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, 1779, by the scribe Yehuda Leib HaKohen. Manuscript on vellum, 20 leaves including one blank, 8.5 by 7.5 inches, 21.5 by 19 centimeters. Written in a fine square Ashkenazi rabbinic and cursive Hebrew script, it's pointed and unpointed, illuminated with decorative vignettes and panels. Slight staining, some portions smudged, contemporary paneled calf gilt, rubbed in a tapestry cloth container. The notice reveals that the reserve was indeed $150,000, which was also the low estimate. The high estimate was $200,000. The sale results say that the Haggadah sold for $165,000. So after Sotheby's took its 10% commission, Jack walked away with $148,500, or about $460,000 in today's money. This was the most important purchase and sale of my father's book-selling career. His reclamation of a nearly lost work of European Judaica was to him a great mitzvah. He helped preserve a remnant of Israel, a testament to the economic and cultural clout his generation of American Jews wielded after the Holocaust. And his auction put him over the top as a financial success, confirming in his mind that he was, at last, the sophisticated upscale bookseller that he aspired to be. It was the gold nugget of his California dream, and he cashed it in. For me, though, it was all vicarious, which is why I'm less concerned with pinning down an exact and verifiable version of Jack's purchase and sale than I am with exploring all the avenues of meaning in his, or rather, in our story. Don't mistake my concern about control as the entire picture here. I also found a few small grains of bullion back in the Golden State, but mine are merely a metaphor for another kind of value. Sure, I'm grateful that Jack sent me photos of every page in the Copenhagen Haggadah, and if I simply wanted to document his good taste, they'd be crucial. No, for me, the most precious items in these stories about his bookstore are those details in the background, or just off camera in scenes like the sale of the Haggadah. That's where I was. That's where my brothers were, all three of us bit players, extras. And having been there, having witnessed those scenes, I can imagine myself into my father's world. Like this scene, his procession to Sotheby's in the early afternoon of November 25. It's a cool day, mid-40s outside, with a few clouds and the mostly sunny sky above the Waldorf Astoria, my father's favorite hotel in New York. I see Jack in a silk scarf and tan corduroy trench coat bought from Saks Fifth Avenue, exiting from the glass revolving doors on Park Avenue, following Alana, who's wearing her fur coat. Jack pulls out a money clip from his right pocket, peeling off a few dollar bills for the doorman, who rushes to get them into one of the yellow cabs lined up at the curb. As they head uptown to Sotheby's new flagship building and world headquarters at 1334 York Avenue, a former cigar factory and Kodak warehouse, Jack is excited, perhaps thumbing through the sale catalog, whose frontispiece is a reproduction of his Haggadah's title page. Photos of two other pages from the Haggadah are included in the overleaf following the lot listing, and though no estimate is included in the listing, estimate on request, Jack knows that it's the most expensive item up for auction. It's worth more than any of the Isidore Kaufmann paintings, the Ilya Shore Silver Sabbath candelabra, or even the important German carved and painted wood circumcision ceremony box, late 17th century, featured on the cover of the catalog. Jack and Alana are whisked upstairs to the private seating area above the bidding room, windowed sky boxes as the Financial Times calls them, where other sellers with high-value lots wait for the auction to begin at 2 p.m. promptly. When it does, Jack watches the action below with fascination. Here he is, the kid from Corona, Queens, the youngest son of an immigrant shochet, a ritual slaughterer, finding himself gratifyingly elevated in more ways than one. The crying of Lot 19 begins. Jack tries to keep track of who's bidding, but a number of potential buyers are calling in by phone to preserve their anonymity, so he can only guess who's on the line. The Israel Museum? The Jewish Historical Museum in Amsterdam? It's all moving quickly now. He feels a jolt of excitement when the bids rise above the reserve. He tries to interpret the auctioneer's movements, and then suddenly he hears the familiar refrain. Going once, going twice, sold. Jack turns to Alana and smiles, rolling his eyes the way he usually does when his face registers surprise or wonder. He thinks the Haggadah was bought by the owner of a chemical company who's noted for his Judaica collection, but that's just a hunch. Soon he's caught up in the flurry of activity after the sale, signing forms, shaking hands, though he can't help trying to keep an eye on what's happening with the other lots. After all, he's a collector too. Can I imagine his daydreams as well on the way back to the Waldorf? This is where I pause, right where I picture the future about to unroll in front of my father like some celestial red carpet that I can only walk backward. I'm writing this, after all, from where it leads, tired after digging out my property from a night of snowfall and still trying to be the good son, or at least the only one willing to weather his endless criticism. Remembering that I grew up in a town where red carpets always look better on camera than they do in real life. Is my version of the story any better than anyone else's in the family? Is it any less true? Maybe I'm just playing a private round of three-card Monte, where there's no honest shuffling, only a sleight of hand meant to confuse the mark, me trying to outsmart myself. But my father's story is as much mine as it is his in a certain sense, and I need to tell it as I experienced it, as I lived it with my family, and as I remember it. Looking up from my notebook, I watched Jack return from the guest bedroom and quickly inspect my sofa to see if it's still clean enough for him to sit on. I'll never know exactly what he was thinking that day at Sotheby's, but always I wonder, between the books and the art and the well-appointed Jewishness in which he clothed himself, what else did he want to do with all that money? What was that man trying to purchase? Why can't I let that question go? And so, thank you. Thank you. And so, this next slide, which I can't get to work, so let's see if it'll go this way. Yes, there we go. So this will give you the location and the dates of operation for the store. What I do in the rest of the book is really use these kinds of personal memories and experiences to eventually realize that the personal is not only political, but also material, commercial, spatial, gendered, collectible, designable, audible, and networked. Those are the theoretical themes that I explore in the book, using them as to frame and then consider in each chapter an aspect of the bookstore's physical presentation so as to recall a particular period in its history. The stories that I tell roughly follow that history in a chronological order, but I often move back and forth in time to reflect on how I came to terms with my own coming of age and my father and his business. I touch on beginnings in the first few chapters, both literally and figuratively, of my father, New York Jewish bookstores, Michael Horelic, and bookstores both Jewish and general in Los Angeles. In the middle chapters, I tally the entwined emotional and material costs incurred by my father's beliefs and obsessions. And in the last chapters, I recount how I found myself once again behind Jack's sales counter just in time to be a witness to the bookstore's final act. What I want to read next is from that earlier part in the book about beginnings, where I use this chapter to think about this fellow, the gentleman that my father bought the bookstore from, Michael Horelic. This is in the chapter entitled The Storefront, which is about place. And so I'll read the first section here that'll give you an idea of what things were like, not only when we arrived in Los Angeles, but what we knew about Michael Horelic. "Get in the other lane," Jack says from the passenger seat. "You don't want to be in this lane going downtown." I continue driving the middle left lane eastbound on the Santa Monica freeway, keeping a steady 65 miles per hour in my father's immaculate, leather-fragrant BMW compact sedan and scanning the surrounding landscape for familiar landmarks from my youth. It's December 2016 and I don't live here anymore, I remind myself. I'm on a research trip, but not my father. "Don't let that car get in. Don't. Why'd you let him in? Laurence, look. Why does he leave so much room ahead of him? He doesn't know how to drive." "Okay, don't listen to me." We're passing the Vermont Avenue off-ramp just south of the Pico Union neighborhood, and I quickly recognize a distraction. This is where we used to get off to visit Michael Horelic, the man who founded the bookstore my father bought. He lived up near the Jewish Federation when it was still at 590 North Vermont, where Jack would sometimes make special deliveries in the evenings or on Sundays. "Dad, didn't we used to go visit Mr. Horelic around here when I was a kid?" "That's right. I brought him payments for the store." "How much did you pay for it?" "He sold it to me for $33,000, and I paid it out monthly to him over 3 years. But I also gave him $5,000 at the end of each year, so what was that? $500 a month, I think?" I can't do the math in my head to double-check him, and payments I don't remember. Just a small, dark apartment in a bungalow court complex, and Horelic with a walker, slowly getting a box of Van Houten chocolates from his fluorescent-lit kitchen to offer my brothers and me. He was in his late 80s by then, and suffering for what I now know was bladder cancer. I always thought my father must have spoken to Horelic about his past, how he came to own a Jewish bookstore, But here's all he knew. Horelik immigrated to the United States from Russia as a boy or young man, but only arrived in Los Angeles in the mid to late 1940s. He didn't know how Horelik started out in the book business, only that by the mid-50s he was a recognized Jewish bookseller with his own storefront on Melrose Avenue, just around the corner from Los Angeles City College. Jack said Horelik had no wife or children and assumed he'd been a lifelong bachelor. They first met in person in 1960 while my father was in LA repping for Bearman House Publishers at the National Association of Temple Educators. An older brother, Rabbi Michael Roth, who had moved there with his family in 1957, introduced him to Horelik, and Jack invited his prospective account out for coffee. By then, Horelik was selling and delivering books to the University of Judaism up on Sunset Boulevard and to Hebrew Union College when it was still located in the Jewish Federation building. He was a distributor for Katav Publishing's reprint of the Jewish Encyclopedia, a path-breaking work of scholarship originally published by Funk and Wagnalls in 12 volumes between 1901 and 1906, and for Judaica Press's reprint of the Blackman Mishnayot, a celebrated edition of the Oral Torah and its compendium of Jewish legal reasoning that was popular for study and reference. He was also a sales representative for Cincino Press, a premier Jewish publisher in the United Kingdom, which was founded in the 1920s and specialized in English translations of the Bible and the Talmud that included interpretations by academic scholars and Christian commentators. Above all, though, Horelik was a Yiddishist, secular in outlook and, according to Jack, intellectual rather than political in his tastes. He was so devoted to the literature of the Mama Lashon, the mother tongue, that he once told a pesky customer looking for the latest novel by Leon Uris, author of the smash bestseller Exodus, to go find such trash somewhere else. Still, he carried a large selection of English and Hebrew language books because, after all, he had to make a living. But there were no tchotchkes for sale in his store, no ritual goods or giftware, and when he met my father, he was impressed more than anything else by the fact that the young man in front of him spoke Yiddish. They hit it off immediately. Was there more to Horelik than just that? Like much of LA's Jewish history, Horelik was a fact I so took for granted that I don't recall asking anyone about him. Growing up, I never questioned whether Jews had lived anywhere else except the flats of Beverly Hills, around the Pico-Robertson neighborhood, or in the Fairfax district, a geographic area that, in my young mind, not only stretched east along Beverly Boulevard, past the old Pan Pacific Auditorium, but also south past Wilshire all the way to Pico and Hauser Boulevards. Throughout the late 1960s and most of the 70s, all the Jews I met seemed settled and comfortable, European in descent or in fact, and well assimilated to the fashions and possessions of middle-class American life. Sure, I knew the Federation building lay somewhere on the long drive to downtown in a predominantly Latino section of the city, and my father knew a few friends and customers who lived in East Hollywood, but that was all far away, like a lot of things in LA. So during my winter break, I'm driving the freeways with my father, running a tutorial for myself on where exactly Jewish bookstores first appeared here, and in search of the retail origins of M. Horelik Books, and thus also of its heir, J. Roth Bookseller, during those flush years after the war. What was Horelik's story? When he showed up, was he as enchanted as I was on our arrival in 1966, that homes here were so unlike those in New York? In Queens, we lived on the third floor of a red brick 6-story apartment building facing the Long Island Expressway. In Los Angeles, our world suddenly opened up. The new apartment at 6450 West Olympic Boulevard was an airy ground floor unit with 2 bedrooms, one large enough to fit 3 twin beds. It had a yellow-tiled kitchen with its own door for milk deliveries, a separate dining room, and a sunny living room where we parked the Steinway baby grand piano. The front windows looked out onto a common courtyard and garden, around which the other apartments were arranged. When you opened the front door, you could hear birds chirping and the light traffic on Olympic washing by. We had moved to South Carthay Circle, just southeast of Beverly Hills, because it was where Horelik's bookstore was located. Our neighborhood was beguiling, too, in its difference from the nondescript Jewish neighborhoods I remembered in Queens. Our 6-unit complex was designed in one of the eclectic revival styles popular in Los Angeles from the 1920s through the 1940s. Up and down the streets were Spanish, colonial, and Mediterranean revival houses and apartment buildings. Ours was French chateau-esque, complete with 2 turrets capped by black spires that guarded each side of the courtyard's front entrance. Everything around us seemed whimsically old, but that was the idea. The folks pouring in during the 1910s and 20s were lured in part by the sly mirage of LA as home to romantic California rancheros and orange groves. And then came a frenetic burst of construction in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s that liberally adapted architectural styles from Spain, Italy, England, and France, as well as from ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and China. To me, Los Angeles wasn't just a city, it was a historical adventure. As I lower the temperature in Jack's car, trying to keep us comfortable under the bright December sun, I recall yet another quirk of the bookstore's neighborhood that I discovered a few years after we moved in, when I was around 9 years old. At the base of a wall behind the Birds of Paradise in the front courtyard of our apartment complex was an access panel that could be jimmied aside, allowing me and my brothers to squeeze into the crawl space underneath the building. In New York, we had basements for storage and heating, which we weren't allowed anywhere near. But in California, look, no basements. Except now, we discovered that California had a different kind of place beneath, built just the right size for children to shimmy around between the foundation and the first floor, where we could hear when a kitchen sink drained or a toilet flushed. Even better, in the hot, dry summers, a little chill leaked through the earth, and lying flat on it, we cooled off, the dirt powdering our skin. Alan, Laurence, Benjamin, get out of there right now. My mother was exasperated. What are you doing? You can get stuck underneath there, and I don't know what. You'll hurt yourselves. Get out now. Look at you, you're filthy. We slid out one by one and pretended to dust ourselves off. Go over to the store and see if your father needs any help. To get there, we headed out to the alley behind our apartment complex and then over to La Jolla Street. Down La Jolla, we passed our family doctor's house and then turned right on Whitworth Drive. We walked another 3 blocks until we reached a short driveway that made a dogleg between the 2 halves of a large corner property on La Cienega Boulevard. There, we cut through to the front of the bookstore. The large show window had a clear yellowish sunshade behind it to protect the stock, and lettered on the plate glass was M. Herelick Books. This is my earliest image of his storefront. It's reproduced in a triptych of black and white photos of Herelick that hang in my study, one of which shows him standing beneath that window sign. His bald, keep-off-free, round head and the few wisps of white hair left on it obscure the bottom right quadrant of the first O in books, inadvertently suggesting a chain link between business and owner. He's a short man with black plastic mid-century glasses, his dark shirt buttoned up to his neck, no tie, a light-colored sweater peeking out from under a rumpled and boxy old suit jacket, gripping in his right hand a plain wooden cane tipped with a rubber foot and angled away from his dark pant legs. Herelick looks straight at the camera, projecting a friendly, if non-committal demeanor. He's on show as much as the merchandise framed in the window behind him. Books arranged mostly spine out on 3 ledges in the bottom third of the window, a few volumes perched on 4 narrow shelves that line each side, 2 small decorative vases, and a couple of framed prints artfully anchoring the lower corners. The only titles I can make out among the faced-out books are 6,000 Years of the Bible by G.S. Wegener, A Treasury of Jewish Folk Song by Ruth Rubin, and Abraham Lincoln, The Prairie Years and the War Years by Carl Sandburg. This is the storefront as both the entrance and public face of a retail business. It's a street-sized picture of a store's goods and character, and whether a storefront has a custom-built design or simply crude signage tacked onto a private home, it signals to potential customers the cost, quality, class, and brand of the product or service being sold. Put a few together on a block, and in the time it takes for the eye to scan it, a neighborhood or commercial strip takes on a recognizable identity, sometimes intended, sometimes not. The items for sale in the show windows are not just consumer goods, they're also tokens of belonging. By appealing to certain tastes, every storefront advertises those things most prized by the clique of people who shop there. Patronizing these stores and purchasing the right items signals an insider's knowledge and confers privilege. That's why storefronts are often comforting, even enjoyable. They tell you where you are in time and place and lend that locale a certain reputation and value. M. Herelick Books, another Jewish-owned and oriented business along a key artery through the quiet residential blocks of South Carthay Circle, mid to late 1960s. Such cultural capital is never at rest, though. It's always in motion, just like the neighborhood and the various consumers in it. Leon Uris may have seemed a poor choice to Herelick, testifying to his customers' dubious understanding of Jewish literacy and want of cultural distinction. But clearly the community of Jews surrounding the store was changing. The storefront at 1070 South La Cienega Boulevard was one of 3 or 4 clustered in that corner property, a little retail complex that included a beauty salon, a printer's shop, and a couple of apartments in the back. It was another of the many quickly built mixed-use developments that made up the small commercial strips thrown up just before and after the Second World War that accompanied the white flight to and population boom on LA's west side. The biggest neighbor on that stretch of La Cienega was Temple Beth Am, founded in 1934, whose steadily expanded campus across the street from the bookstore housed one of the larger conservative congregations in the city. As Jack tells it, Herelick knew what he was doing when he moved from Melrose Avenue to a storefront next door to Beth Am sometime in the late 50s, and then, when the Temple bought that building to make way for a new Hebrew school, to the east side of the boulevard in '64. Beth Am was one of a number of synagogues in the Fairfax, Carthay Circle, Beverly Hills, and Pico Robertson neighborhoods that served the Jewish professionals, mass media employees, aerospace workers, and small shopkeepers who were rapidly gravitating toward the ocean and into the San Fernando Valley. Perhaps tellingly, Herelick's storefront at 1070 had no Hebrew or Yiddish on any of its signage. Like the book on Abraham Lincoln so prominently featured in its show window, his shop catered to a generation of increasingly affluent Jewish Angelenos with diverse literary interests and tastes, still fascinated by great emancipations and making a quick exodus themselves from urban Jewish enclaves in the Midwest and Northeast, or from older neighborhoods in LA, such as Boyle Heights, the Central Avenue corridor around East Adams Boulevard, and Wilshire Center. As I pass all the store signage lining the I-10 on my way downtown, I reflect on that old black and white photo and think, isn't Los Angeles just one large storefront? This occurs to me not just because I'm immediately reminded of the city's infatuation with businesses whose storefronts look like giant hot dogs, tamales, coffee pots, ice cream buckets, and donuts. Or even because an artist like Ed Ruscha thought that photographing every building on the Sunset Strip and documenting the quirky architectural styles of the city's gas stations and apartment buildings revealed both the ingenuity and banality of LA's ephemeral mass culture. No, it occurs to me because Herelick's bookstore and my father's purchase of it molded my thinking about the complicated relation between the city's shape-shifting commercial landscape and its fugitive consumers. Herelick's storefront was like so many others in the city, another attempt to stake a claim on transient grounds, to fix one's being and business into the fast-moving scheme of things and say, I'm here, or we're here, though always under the shadow of being taken over or turned out. Location so crucial to retail success was important as well to my education about this, even though it didn't sink in until much later. La Cienega wasn't Fairfax and would never become what Pico Boulevard is today, and so I appreciate only now how that snapshot, in addition to the nostalgic comfort it still summons for me, also captured a moment and a locale in Los Angeles Jewish history that was not just in between, in property use, demographics, and time, but also in process. Our arrival and Jack's choice of Herelick and Roth booksellers as the new name for the store evidenced just as much, as did the store's customers with their multiple affiliations, senses of Jewish self, and ways of talking about both of these. For many, this went entirely without saying, because the contemporary flux and flow of their social lives appeared entirely stable and natural to them. I see in Herelick's storefront a reflection of that complexity, multiplicity, and naive self-regard, and consequently, how his and my father's trained me to read for contradictions. Their storefronts were my primers for how to grasp, whether in books or in built environments, the interpretive clutter of a text and its confusion of meanings. They taught me how to attend to the various stories I heard told about my space and my place as I thought of it, and how these landed tales of our Jewish life continually bumped up against other stories and geographies that I stumbled into in dependably unpredictable ways. Think of the eclectic revival styles of my childhood neighborhood, where the exteriors looked like one thing, the mostly Jewish people inside sounded like something else, and only paid handymen, curious kids, and insects explored the crawl spaces underneath. Storefronts come and go, expand and contract, toggle back and forth between expressions of their owners' tastes and those of their clientele. They're how I imagine that Jewishness and memory continually relocate in this city, moving sideways and close to the ground, but not subterranean, always next to or among, a history in rebuilds and add-ons, like the Los Angeles described by various writers as a tale in concrete of its residents' dreams. Or as Mike Davis says in City of Quartz, a utopia and dystopia for advanced capitalism, a place where people and things define, distort, and then redefine each other again in ways as protean as the architecture. I checked the speedometer and then glanced at Jack. Was her relic even there that day in '67 or '68 when I arrived to help? Standing in front of the store with my brothers, the ship's coffee shop sign up the street caught my attention. Maybe Dad will get us tuna sandwiches to eat in the back room for lunch. We looked in through the show window to see if he was alone or taking care of a customer, but the glare bouncing off the glass was too strong. All we could see were ourselves hovering ghost-like over the books on display. Thank you. And now for the last final short piece, I want to read to you from the section about the costs that were incurred in growing up in a bookstore. This, of course, is a picture of the protagonist of this particular chapter called The Second Store, which is about gender. That's my mom in the center. That's me and my brothers around her. And yes, that's me with a 70s halo of hair, which I will never see again. But in this section, I'm reminded of something that Evan Friss, who just wrote a book about the history of the American bookshop, wrote in his book that the children who grow up in bookstores generally don't have happy tales to tell. And when I met him in person in Harrisburg, because he was there for the Harrisburg Book Festival, he said to me, yeah, every kid I've ever met who grew up in a bookstore seemed really unhappy, and in some cases angry at their folks. And of course, if you got to compete with books for attention, that's going to be a hard battle to win. In this chapter, I talk about my dad's desire to be seen as a bookman, and my mom's attempt to figure out what it meant to be a partner to such a person. In trying to think about how to be a partner, of course, that introduced stresses into their relationship. I should say that I'm reading this section at the urging of Mary and Monica, who both said, you must read this particular section. So their attempt to work together, the rivalry over the store, wasn't for ownership, as I write, but rather for recognition. And the hurt each endured in not being acclaimed for what they believed was their due must have exacted a cost on the sales floor and in the bedroom. Things between a man and a woman, my mother tries to explain. She's hinted a few times over the course of our conversation that they had issues with intimacy. I don't ask for details, but I begin to see a pattern where intimacy is both a problem and a potential solution. To try and fix the marriage, I said again, we should go to Israel, just me and him. But he backed out, and I went with Aunt Eula instead. So they tried opening a second store. Jack and Rochelle found a modest retail space at 4847 Paso Robles Avenue, a little side street north of Ventura and just west of Balboa Boulevard in the San Fernando Valley. The rent was low, and consequently, so were the stakes of their experiment. Rochelle remembers that the store did pretty well. Customers started coming in to browse and shop, or would order books from her that Jack would deliver, usually during the day, but sometimes he'd bring them home in the evenings, where she'd prepare them for pickup at her store in the morning. Occasionally on a Sunday, I'd keep her company, wandering around the small sales floor and thinking that the few dark wood tables and wire book racks made the place seem like a mini version of the store in the city. Rochelle seemed happy to have a shop of her own. Jack remembers that the store only did okay, and even if it made their working together more feasible, it was still an extra expense he wasn't sure would pan out. He placed 2 ads in the Los Angeles Times in November 1973, both the same, informing the public, "Our Valley store will be open on Sunday, December 2, 9, and 16 from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. for your Hanukkah shopping." Maybe he could maximize his holiday business. And then, sometime in December, the box appeared in front of the shop door. It must have been a weekday, and just another mild, sunny LA morning as Rochelle pulled up to the curb in her black 4-door Lincoln Continental. It was the Wednesday Continental, the one she'd specially ordered from the dealer, insisting that it had to have come off the assembly line on a Wednesday, when the workers would, according to her labor calculations, be at the peak of their attention to quality and safety. Rochelle slid out from behind the wheel and approached the storefront. Since Jack took care of delivering and picking up books, a square book-sized cardboard box addressed to her, but without a publisher's name on it, immediately struck her as highly suspicious. When she picked it up, she thought she heard a metal-like rattle, so she quickly but gently put it down again. It was, after all, only a month and a half since the end of the Yom Kippur War, that disastrous surprise, when my mother had anxiously waited by the phone, hoping to hear from her stepbrother and his family, and all the while watching television news reports about the mounting Israeli losses. Sure, we were 9,000 miles away, but Los Angeles had seen its share of anti-Semitic incidents in the past, enough that Rochelle felt justified in regularly advising my brothers and me on what to do should the Nazis come looking for us in Encino, which may have been a Jewish beachhead, but that didn't stop her from warily noting to us that there were still a lot of WASP-like locals she didn't trust who'd come out to the valley in the 1940s and 50s to enjoy the horse farms and their distance from all those unwelcome newcomers flooding into the city. And so, in an instant, her highly calibrated danger radar, a product of her upbringing and of her childhood in southern Pennsylvania, where one of her first vivid memories was of a neighbor boy smacking her head against a picket fence and calling her a dirty Jew, flicked on and sent a screeching warning signal down her spine. The box could only be one thing: a bomb. The story gets a little muddled here because, knowing my mother, wouldn't she call the police first and stay out of the store? In the version that's stuck in my mind, though, she calls the fire department and waits inside. An engine arrives and the firefighters gather around the box, some already removing their jackets and helmets under the warming LA winter sun. Rochelle can't see the box now, only hear the firefighters' voices through the plate glass of the door, but it's clear that someone's already carefully opening it, and soon she hears a smatter of laughs that gets louder and louder as the men seem to pass something around. Finally, one looks in through the door and, pulling himself together, comes in and shows Rochelle the source of that ominous clinking in the box. At first, she thinks it's a baby's sock with a Santa Claus head where someone's tiny toes should go, a little metal bell sewed to the top of Santa's hat. But the extra ball of material attached to it makes no sense until the smiling firefighter explains that, "Ma'am, it's a penis warmer. It's a Santa penis warmer for Christmas." How did I hear the story this way? Was it the heated subject of another too loud argument that evening, whose details drifted through the walls of our rancher? Or did Al explain it to me later? No matter. Here's the pattern in bold relief. My mother trying to fix their lack of intimacy through a second store that would reunify her and Jack in business and in bed. My father trying to address their problem with a problematically erotic solution. How could he have thought that his gift, not of lingerie or even perfume, but of a phallic costume that just begs to be interpreted as a gift of his virility and dominance, would produce any kind of desire in my mother? And why Santa Claus? What kind of Jewish man sends that? The kind, I suppose, that finally relents and goes to Israel with my mother in the summer of 1974. Taking my younger brother Ben and me along with them because they said this was also my official post-bar mitzvah pilgrimage there. Al stayed at home with Oma since he and she had gone to Switzerland and Israel after his bar mitzvah 2 years before. We stayed for 2 weeks in an apartment in Bat Yam, a hardscrabble neighborhood of Middle Eastern Jewish immigrants south of Tel Aviv, where between tours to Jerusalem and Masada, Haifa, and the just-cooled battlefields of the Golan Heights, My mother would regularly urge Ben and me to go downstairs for a couple of hours and play with the Israeli kids hanging out in the crowd on the street. Now I know why. Whatever their hopes were, it didn't work. Before the Jewish high holidays, my father closed the second store, claiming that it was losing money, and in the December 31, 1974 financial statement, he reported that the year's expenses for the Encino store were $5,200.56, which amounts to around $33,000 in 2025. In any event, not long after, Rochelle had divorce papers delivered to him. By the beginning of 1975, my first and most influential example of Jewish male corporeal style was living back in the city, along with his meticulously arranged closet full of suits and his secret stash of cherry men's magazines. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. And now I'd love for Dr. Roth to walk to the back before people get up and get them while they're hot. Unpacking My Father's Bookstore. Thanks, everybody. Good night.